A child is a treasure we should never ever spend. A child is a teacher, a child is a friend. Now I leave you with a message of peace and love. A child is a blessing from the Father up above. Oh, who speaks for the children? Who gives them a voice? Who stands up for the children? Who gives the children a choice? Who? Tell me who? Tell me who? A child should be free. Who speaks for the children?
Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host on CWS, Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us this evening. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's always a pleasure having you aboard. Let me introduce you a bit to CWS. The goal of CWS is to have conversations with people about their journeys. How are they using their gifts and talents to help others? How are they contributing to humanity in a positive way? So I'm always on the lookout for ordinary people doing extraordinary things or doing things extraordinarily well. I really do believe in success. I believe success is extremely important. My take on success, however, is that our successes do not belong to us. I am a supporter of success, and when one is successful, you should revel in it. But remember that, or this is my spin on it, when you're successful, think of your success as a beacon of light that should illuminate around you to remind others that they too have a light or they too can shine, perhaps to help them find their own switch. And that is why I'm often urging others to be successful, not so that they can glorify their success, but so others can benefit from it. And last night I spoke about the importance of confidence, that so many of us allow our confidence to be assaulted, allow our confidence to be eroded or corroded by others who do not believe in us. I challenge that. I think it is important that we adopt an attitude of confidence. As a matter of fact, I think confidence should be a movement, that when you recognize confidence in others, you should encourage it, because confidence has a way of opening doors, has a way of corroding doubt and low self-esteem. Well, you have to get past that to be confident anyway. And the other thing is fear. Fear is normal. Each and every one of us has some kind of fear, be it rational or irrational. But what is important is that we find a way to deal with our fears. I personally have a group of people very close to me, very close and dear to me. I call them my oases of energy. It's a term that I came up with that represents anyone or anything that can charge you positively. If you're feeling down, you're feeling out of place, you're feeling depressed, you must find a way to tap into one of your oases of energy. It could be a scripture, it could be a song, it could be the memory of a beautiful moment, it could be someone, no matter how or when you call them, they have something positive to say to you, but anything that can charge you. That is, to me, an oasis of energy. So we must strive, or should strive, to be positive, strive to be confident, strive to be less doubtful. Tonight, I have a very interesting guest. I am eager for the other side of the break to have a conversation with her. I know some of you say, well, it's, Why not an interview? I think somehow the word interview seems rigid. And I like the fluidity of a conversation. I like the organicness of a conversation. So, hence, conversation with Selwyn. I take a break and, well, we'll have fun on the other side. Good evening. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS. The wonderful woman on the other side of the screen is Rosary Morelli. Rosary, good evening.
Good evening, Selwyn.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Rosary, I am going to start a bit with your timeline. Well, start a bit with who you are. And just give me a minute. Partner at Morelli, Garrard, and LaSalle, boutique litigation firm specializing in defending hospitals, physicians, midwives, physicians' assistants, dentists, and nursing homes in actions alleging medical malpractice and general negligence. Vice President of the New York State Medical Malpractice Defense Bar, member of the Association for Healthcare Risk Management of New York and the Supreme Court Medical Malpractice Committee for New York County. Former member of the American Board of Trial Advocates and the Defense Research Institute. Lectures extensively on numerous topics dealing with medical malpractice, including programs in promoting women and minorities in the law. What were you like growing up as a little girl?
Well, I think that I was always pretty determined from the very start to speak my mind and to take care of myself. I grew up in a non-traditional household. I was born in 1953, and when I was growing up, my mother was the main breadwinner in the household. My father was more of the term actually didn't exist at the time, but a house husband. He did work, but he was mainly responsible for taking care of the kids, cooking the meals. I have a younger brother, and out there and very determined to succeed. She was a high school graduate who worked for the telephone company as an operator and worked her way up into middle management, which was quite an accomplishment back then.
And so, what games did you like playing as a child?
The only thing I liked to do was read.
Read?
I was not the type of child to play any type of games. Did not play with dolls. That, it just wasn't my thing. I loved to read.
Love to read. And when did you decide, realize you wanted to be a lawyer?
I think from a very young age. I remember in 6th grade being in a play, and I played the role of a lawyer, and I was well suited to that.
And how did your parents influence you as a child?
Not really that much. It wasn't easy for my parents. We grew up pretty poor, and the main focus was, getting food on the table and doing what they could to keep a roof over our heads. They married very young. I mean, my mother's only 20 years older than I am. So, it was not easy. It was not easy back then for them.
And you're a mother, and
yes.
And so, what is the one thing you will want your daughter to learn about life?
Well, I think the most important thing for my daughter to learn, and I think she has, she's 16 going on 17, is that it's very important to give back. You know, we're all born with certain skills and certain positive aspects, and if you're one of the lucky ones to be born intelligent and capable and competent, it's not all about success for you, but it's about helping everybody else who's made your life possible.
I like that.
Yeah.
And you're a very experienced trial attorney
Yes.
with much success to your credit. One recent example, which resulted in a drug company that manufactured the vaccine liable for $22.5 million. Can you tell us what that was like?
Well, that was a very interesting case. It was in Staten Island, and I represented a pediatrician who had died during the course of the litigation. And the case was about a father who had contracted polio as a result of his child receiving the vaccine. And the lawsuit was brought against my pediatrician and the drug company that manufactured the vaccine. And it was interesting in that the drug company was represented by a lot of very high power attorneys, and I, representing the doctor, was in the courtroom alone. But it proved well for the physician. I think the jury came to the right conclusion in terms of him and found that he was not liable. But the jury was upset with the drug company because they felt that the label and the warnings weren't sufficient to let the doctor be able to tell the parents that they could contract polio when dealing with their children who had been newly vaccinated.
And as you know, you're up against these big lawyers, experienced, I presume male. I'm just
No,
going
you're
out on a
correct
limb.
in your presumption.
Right, and and for women who are listening out there, women who are attorneys and women who are thinking about becoming attorneys or probably going to law school, what was that like for you as a woman representing this client and standing up against these giants, all male, and winning? What was that like? How did that feel?
Well, I think that it's very easy for women to be trial attorneys, but I don't think it's recognized and promoted. And the reason I think it's easy is because we tend to be very credible. We have the skills to effectively communicate. And one line that I always tell young women is when people think of an ambulance chaser, which is a derogatory term about attorneys, they don't picture a woman running after that ambulance. They picture a man.
Come to think of it, that's true.
And I think that we come with a great deal more credibility to the courtroom. And over time, the majority of people who are on our juries are female. The pool may have 20, 25% men, and then when you end up with your 6 or 8 or 10 jurors, depending on the number of alternates, the majority will be female. And I think we communicate better with women than the traditional male attorney.
I recently had a jury duty, and the case was settled. So I never really saw the inside of the courtroom on that particular case. But now I'm thinking about it. Several women were chosen. You think lawyers are predisposed to choosing women for juries?
Well, I think that you begin by having more women to choose from, because if you have 100 people, 80 of them will end up being women. So I think that there's a tendency to end up picking the women because there's so many more of them. I don't know. I guess I tend to just look at the jurors and say, are they nice, regular people who have no axe to grind? That's it.
And there was a case before Justice Joseph Levine in Kings County. A doctor's medical license was suspended and settled for $1 million, and then the co-defendant hospital chose to go to verdict.
Yes.
I was found liable for $4 million. Are you at liberty to tell us about that case?
Well, that case was against one of the best malpractice attorneys, plaintiff's attorneys in the New York area. And it was a difficult case because I do think that the doctor had some issues in terms of how he dealt with his delivery. But I think that this plaintiff's attorney really targeted the hospital, and I don't think that they realized that they were going down the tubes. And I think their attorney failed to recognize it while it was occurring. So I think it's difficult because when you do try a case, you go into court believing that you're right, and you want to believe that you're going to win, and I think you have to be honest enough with yourself to know when you're not winning and not keep telling yourself you are. And I think that this attorney suffered from that.
As I was going through your bio, and I saw how successful you are at a trial, as a trial attorney.
Yes.
And the big names that you've come up against. Well, it's obvious to all of us you're a woman, and which is near and dear to me. I believe that women sometimes get a raw deal in our society, but there's another conversation. Now, when you get a case and it's challenging, and you look on the other side, and there are all these high-priced, successful attorneys, what goes through your mind?
Well, I focus on the case itself. I never worry about my adversary or who they are. I go in with a plan to show the jury what occurred. Being on the defense side, you do have the luxury in those cases where maybe your client didn't do the right thing, that you could settle the case.
Okay.
So there is a self-selection process. But I just look at it in terms of educating the jury and letting them understand, and it's my job for them to understand the medicine so that they could look at everything that's presented to them and make an informed decision so that justice will be done.
You talk about educating the jury. You're a lecturer.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
How much has that helped you, or does that help you in educating the jury?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be able to understand something yourself and then be able to explain it in simple terms to other people so that they can understand it. There isn't anybody who sits on a jury that shouldn't be able to understand the medical issues in the case if the lawyer does the job that they should. But I think there's a lot of disconnect because a lot of attorneys are in a place that makes it difficult for them to relate to the people who are sitting on the jury.
I was going to ask you about my next question. What are some of the most memorable? I'll ask you a memorable medical malpractice case you've tried.
Well, I think that what happens is you find little portions of each case that you remember, and even not only the trials, but the discovery stage too, when you do depositions. You have plenty of stories to entertain people from now until the end of time. I mean, people are just people, and it's life. The reality of it is always intriguing.
Is this your dream job?
I suppose, but I think that the mistake that I made, and something I tell my daughter, is don't plan on doing the same job your whole life. I think that you have to move on. I think giving something 20, 25 years and then do something else. And she's going to live, I imagine, even longer and work even longer. I mean, I've been working for 34 years as a lawyer. It's a long time.
That's a long time. But that's good advice, especially now that there's been this paradigm shift in terms of career. Back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and possibly the early 90s, you could have depended on a career. Today, those days are over. You have to be multi-talented and multifaceted.
And I think to challenge yourself intellectually, I think you need to go into different areas and to get a new lease on life. You have capabilities that could take you in many areas. Why limit yourself to the same one for 45, 50 years?
I was right about this conversation tonight. It's going to be very interesting and wonderful. I like that. And so after 31 years with Heidell-Pittoni, Murphy and Bach, and with 7 years as a senior trial attorney, you started your own law firm.
Yes.
There were probably considerations such as age, gender, family, and the economy, yet you made that move. So how important was that for you, and what prompted you to make such a decision?
Well, I think that with time everything changes, and I grew up at Heidell, and it was certainly a family environment and atmosphere. And in the beginning, we were only 7 lawyers, and that was back in 1981. And over the years, thankfully, we were very successful. We employed a lot of people. We trained a lot of lawyers over time. But the firm grew significantly in size, and as a result of that, the environment changed. And one of the things I've always been very interested in is seeing women and minorities, especially female minorities, find success, have mentors, and be in a position to have someone to guide them and give them the chance that they're sometimes not given because they don't fit the mold. And it was always important to me. In the early years with Heidell's office, that happened. I was in the position to do that. And as it grew, it changed. And I just reached a point where I wanted to go back to being small.
Right.
And having that we're all on the team family environment, and also promoting women and minorities. So I started my own firm with 2 other women, and one happens to be Hispanic, which is a very, very rare thing in United States, and it's been great. It's really
Wonderful.
been great. We have a staff of all women, except we hired a young male associate, and it's interesting for him.
Was that a tough decision?
No, it wasn't, because he was very qualified. He stood out head and shoulders above the other candidates we had. And I have to tell you, I did have a learning experience with searching for this associate, because we found that the women that we were interviewing were less likely to take the risk. We're a brand new firm, and we're starting out. I'm sure we will be extraordinarily successful, but it takes time to get there.
Right.
And I think that a lot of the women were risk adverse. No matter how we tried to convince them it was worth doing. And I was a bit surprised about that. It was a learning experience for me.
Shocking?
Yes, because I have to say sometimes I was always blindly on the side of women.
Right.
That it was the environment that kept them from doing whatever they needed to do to get ahead. And I started to think that maybe, and it is a chicken and egg situation,
Yes.
Maybe there's something about women and their attitudes that keep them from being successful. And one of the things you have to do is be willing to take a risk. And obviously this was a big risk. I'm going to be turning 60 next month, but it was something that I felt if I didn't do it today, there was never going to be time to do it.
It never fails how sometimes the flow takes you, if you surrender to the flow, how it takes you along. The next thing I was going to talk about is that phrase we coined, do it now or not at all, right? And which you have.
Yes.
Right? How does being a woman challenge and or equip you for success in a male-dominated industry?
Well, I think that in terms of litigation, I think that it's helpful to be a woman because there's so few of us, and your adversaries are very uncomfortable. They're used to dealing with men in the courtroom, and a good number of these male attorneys really think they're gladiators. I mean, they think they're going to go in there and wrestle or do something. I don't know what. But it really tends to throw them off, and you find that happens also with witnesses. We use expert witnesses in our malpractice cases. And when you bring in female expert witnesses, it throws off their tempo. But certainly having a female adversary makes it more difficult for them.
I'm going to go to the chat room for a second.
Okay.
Kathy asked, how do you juggle a heavy trial schedule with your responsibilities as a mother?
Well, I think that's one of the more difficult things to do. And I guess the main thing I do is I don't sleep a lot. That's one thing. I'm not a big sleeper, so I've always been up early, ready, and going. I do think that from my experiences, it seems to me as your children get older, they need you more. It wasn't very difficult when my daughter was young, but now that she's reached her adolescence and as a junior in high school, it's more difficult. But computers have changed our lives because you can be at home and they could be doing their homework, and you could be doing your work. And I also think it sets a very good example for them. It didn't seem to me to be a fair situation where, my child has to sit there and do homework and, I watch TV and goof off. So I have the opportunity to do the work at that time too. I'm not going to say it's not without its sacrifice.
Right.
And you do have to be a bit on the selfless side because you're the one who ends up coming last.
And Lisa asked, is it possible to do it all? And that is attorney, mother, etc., without hired help?
I think when your child is young, the answer to that is you're really going to need it, especially when you're in a profession that demands you be there with short notice. I think that when you're on a tight schedule and you have to pick up your child and you have the pressure of that, it robs you of the availability to say yes to particular assignments or to remain at the office and not have people be nasty about your leaving. So I think you do. I think you absolutely do. You do need to be able to be in the position to have some sort of childcare arrangement that gives you flexibility.
Okay. And Jerry asked, are you single?
No, I'm on my second husband, but he's the final one.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. And so why was starting a law firm significant at this particular time?
Well, I think one of the reasons was I realized that I was going to want to keep working for a long time. My daughter will be going to college, and as I said, I'm a high energy person, and I wanted to continue working. When you're in the structure of these large law firms, there are more rules and regulations about retirement and what you could do. So this way, going back into a small environment, I will have more control over when I would retire or slow down, things of that nature.
How has it been so far for you?
I hate to say this, but you guys
Right.
make everything seem like it's so hard and so impossible, and but it's not. It's not. Everybody's been very supportive of us. Everybody we reach out to has been very helpful, and it's just it's like running a house.
Yeah.
You set it up, you do it, you hire people who know what to do. New York is filled with people who want to work on a part-time basis, even for, file room, all those things. There's a whole culture out there of evening workers, and it works perfectly.
So what advice do you have for women over 40 thinking about starting over or getting into business for themselves?
I guess you just have to be willing to work hard, deal with the difficult situations. I think that as much as people would like to think that things have improved, I think our society is still pretty sexist. So it's difficult. It's, you have to suffer a lot of indignities, but you do it. I had a health insurance man leave me like a 10-minute message screaming at me because he thought he had an appointment, which he didn't. And I was shocked that he left this message, and I said to my husband, I'm sure if I were a man, he would never have thought of doing that. So, but you know what? The hell with him. Do you experience a lot of situations in the courtroom where you realize, or it would seem that if you were not a woman, it would have been different? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, I think the worst thing you could do is underestimate your opponent. And it does inure to our benefit when people don't take us as seriously or think we're not going to be, as firm in our positions as a man would be. And I know my partners and I are very cordial and nice and smile and tell them to go jump in a river, We're just, we're not going to change our position because of our sex. We're not going to be intimidated.
I like that. 30-something years, quite a long time. What is the most valuable lesson you learned from any of your clients?
That's a hard one because so much of what we do in representing the doctors and the nurses doesn't really present them as the sympathetic party, because you have to remember the plaintiff is the one who's been injured.
Right.
And we deal with severely injured adults and children. So people's natural sympathy are with the plaintiff, the injured person.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a professional and you've been accused of doing something wrong, you cannot even begin to believe how much it hurts and how upsetting it is. And a good deal of what I do in working with my clients is to help them psychologically deal with it. And I've been in a lot of circumstances where it's been extremely rewarding by being able to comfort these people and to let them know that it's okay. And go in there and tell your story, tell the truth, and let people see that you did the best job you could, but we are only human.
Mm-hmm. You think, I presume a lot of these clients are repeat clients.
Not necessarily.
Not
but
necessarily,
yeah,
okay.
there are a group of repeats, yeah.
But you get referrals
Mhm.
because. So, how widespread do you believe is the age generational issue in your profession?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, the issue with age discrimination, the whole generational age discrimination issue.
Well, I think it does exist, and I
Mhm.
think it exists across the board, not only in the legal field, but I think in all professions. And if anything, my sense from my experience and that of my friends is that it's harder on older women than it is older men. I think it's more difficult for women as they age to continue to be accepted in the workforce. I maybe men just age better, I don't know.
But with all of this, all these various challenges and so on, what keeps you going? What motivates you?
Well,
Or-
I think the intellectual challenge.
Mhm.
I also think the opportunity to work with people, especially with the younger attorneys, and to be able to teach them not only about how to handle the case, but about life and how to deal with what comes up. A lot of what you do at work is just a life lesson. You spoke about, courage and self-confidence and things of that nature. And it takes a lot. It's not so dissimilar from raising a child.
We are in a cyberspace era,
Mm-hmm.
and social media is ubiquitous. It's all over the place. So, what are your thoughts on social media as it relates to the legal profession?
Well, I think it certainly has changed the profession,
Mhm.
and I think you have to be much more aware of what's going on. But you really can't control it.
Right.
There are issues that come up with jurors using their, smartphones to Google information or Google people to find out things while the trial is going on. And they're given strict instructions. And in the old days, the instructions were don't talk to anybody. Don't read the newspaper about
Mhm.
this. Don't go home and read it in a book. But it's much more tempting. I mean, we all Google everything all
Yes.
the time.
Yeah, I certainly do.
Yeah.
And do you think that social media is better for deepening relationships with existing clients or finding new clients?
I have to tell you that my partners who are younger firmly believe that it's Facebook and all
Right.
that is very good for relationships with clients and for getting new clients. I've come a long way, but not that far.
Oh gosh, let's take a break on that note.
Okay.
We are back, and for those of you joining us for the first time, I'm your host, Selwyn Collins of CWS, with the esteemed Rosary Morelli on the other side of the screen. Rosary, how are you holding up so far?
Not bad.
Good, wonderful. And so I want to continue with asking you about, start with this. What are your favorite type of cases?
I don't have a favorite type. I see every case as a challenge, and what I enjoy about it is meeting all of the new people. It's very fascinating to talk to the involved people. It is a bit like solving a mystery. You do have a written hospital record or a doctor's record that records some of what happened, but when you speak to the individuals involved, they all have very different recollections of what occurred. And trying to piece it together to find out what really happened is the challenge.
You like that?
Oh yeah.
If you had the opportunity to become a judge, what would be some of your considerations?
I don't think I would want to do it because I like being involved in the action. I like a good fight.
So, what is the hardest thing you have ever done to ensure your clients receive the best representation?
I think just making sure you do the work that's required. It's difficult at times to balance everything so that you know you've done 110% of the work and that you're completely prepared. And I think the hardest thing is the emotional sacrifice, to try and balance the needs of family with knowing that you have to do the best job possible for your client in a very short period of time when you're trying the case.
And what are some of the things going through your mind if a case seems like the judge may not rule in your favor?
I think it's always hard to tell a professional that this jury is most likely not going to find that you did the right thing. Most people try to do the right thing, use their best judgment, and especially in the medical profession, want to help people. It's difficult to know that this person who's dedicated their life to helping others is going to have to pay money. Well, their insurance carrier is going to have to pay money on their behalf because it's an admission that, in their minds, that they will be seen as having done something wrong.
You lecture on medical malpractice, promoting women and minority. What is most challenging about lecturing on topics dealing with promoting women and minority?
I think it's the lack of acceptance. I think that most people, even when I started in this profession, don't want to hear it. They don't want to believe that it's more difficult to be a woman or a minority in our profession, and that we don't necessarily have all the same opportunities. I think that those in control and essentially in power don't want to think that they're not fair and that they're not doing everything possible to give women and minorities the opportunities that they need.
What do you tell lawyers who say that promoting women and minorities in the law is not urgent, it's not important?
Well, I think the easiest thing, especially now that I've gotten older, is when you talk to male attorneys who have daughters. It's very easy to point out to them, well, how would you want your daughter treated? Would you want her to have the same opportunities that your son has? And I think that when they see it on that level, perhaps they think about it a little differently, or they don't.
And which leads me to, what advice would you give to a lawyer debating the merits of women in business? I
know that there's a lot of controversy that'll result when, for example, you'll get, recently there was that book written, Lean In.
Lean In, yes.
And there was, a whole lot to do about, well, is it true, is it not true? And then I read that book at the same time I was reading the autobiography by Justice Sotomayor from, the Supreme Court. And her book impressed me so much more in terms of do the job, put your heart into it, and do everything you can to succeed, by still remaining sensitive to the needs of those around you. Whereas with Lean In, I didn't get that sense at all.
You what do you think the future holds for promoting women and minorities in law?
I think that it's going to be a long, tough road. I don't think things have changed. I just don't see it. Maybe if the economics changed severely and it became not such a lucrative field,
You
you'd
think
probably see more women then.
you think part of that is because there's this perception of the old boys club?
Well, I think that it does exist and it perpetuates itself. I think that we have a tendency, for example, when we hire and promote people, to tend to think that the best people are those who are most like ourselves.
Very candid. I'm going to go to the chat room. Kathy, what do you do when you have to represent someone who you know has made a mistake or injured someone?
Well, as I said, we have the the luxury of saying, settle the case. And the way it works is a good number of the cases are settled, but they're settled for many reasons. Not because the doctor or the medical practitioner has done something wrong, but the economics of it. It's very costly to try these cases, and it's a gamble. If you could settle a case for an amount of money that's far less than you could lose by verdict, it's a business decision. And I think we're seeing more and more of that than we ever did before.
And Ben asked, most attorneys that I know are type A personalities and have control issues. Fair to say?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we all have control issues. Ask any married couple. Forget about attorneys.
And Ash asked, what is the drive that pushed you into your career and how do you retain it today?
Well, I think that when I started out, I was a young woman coming of age when women were just starting to go into careers other than being secretaries and teachers. And coming from the working class background that I did, a mark of success was to be a doctor or a lawyer. I wasn't particularly good at the science courses, so law seemed a much easier route to go, and I thought that I would do well in litigation. What keeps me motivated is I just enjoy the work, and I can't imagine not having it.
And Ramiro asked, did you say there is a Hispanic partner? Is she single? What are your other partners?
Well, I think that one of the things I'm taking this question is one that's asking about how do women succeed, because there are a great number of women who end up being successful, but they sacrifice a family and they sacrifice having a marriage. Both of my partners are married and both have children. So it can't, when people say, can you do it all? I don't see why not. I really don't. I don't think it's difficult, but it's not all that difficult. Just do it.
And what is the most exciting, or what is most exciting about being a woman in business?
I think it's the challenge and never knowing each day what's going to happen, especially since you're a woman. You just never know what's going. You never know.
I think Ramiro said something. We still minorities, viva la raza. And Ash asked, conscience versus reality must be a real challenge with some of your clients. How much impact does that have on you and your work?
Well, I think I'm a pretty effective communicator, and in those instances where something has not been done correctly, I think I'm pretty good at explaining why and why not.
Hold a second. One of the challenges of this chat room is that sometimes when a question is long, it goes over to the next section. So let me reread it as Ash intended it. Conscience versus reality must be a real challenge with some of your clients. How much impact does that have on you and your work? And then the next piece said, as in the client attorney privilege, I mean.
Well, everything that transpires between the attorney and client is privileged.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the challenge is dealing with the person emotionally. I think there's a big element of hurt and disbelief on the part of these practitioners that have been sued. Some of them are more reluctant to admit that they made a mistake, but
Mhm.
that's what it's about. It's negligence. It's not intentional,
Mm-hmm.
and it happens.
What inspires you today?
Well, I think one of the big inspirations is my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and presenting the picture of a strong woman who can succeed and take care of herself. And I also think the women that I've worked with over the years. For example, there's so many of the young female associates at my old firm that I keep in touch with and that we still talk and discuss the law and their dreams and their hopes and their plans. And I like being a mentor, and I know that there are people that rely upon me. It's not that I
Mhm.
haven't mentored young men also, because
Mhm.
I have, and I enjoy that too. And also my partners. I feel like we're creating something wonderful, and it's important for me to be there for them to help them through this, because I am, I guess, the senior attorney.
I like that. What was the last experience that made you a stronger person?
I don't think I could put it into just one event.
Uh-huh.
But I think one of the things that I've learned with time, and I guess comes with age, is the fact that you can speak up when you see a wrong occurring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unusual in our profession to have either other attorneys or even some judges really not behave appropriately towards the lawyers, especially the younger lawyers. As I said, some people see this as a very confrontational environment, and I of late have to say that I don't tolerate it. I don't have to have something directed at me that's inappropriate. I feel
Mhm.
much more protective in terms of the other lawyers, especially the younger ones, about speaking up if they're not being treated properly by another lawyer, or even on those occasions by a judge.
And Lisa asked, "Is your job stressful? What do you do to unstress?"
It's very stressful, and in the old days I used to exercise, and now I just eat.
And Lisa asked again, what qualities should one look for in a mentee?
I think your personalities have to click. I think
Mhm.
you have to be on the same page. I think you have to start out with the same basic values in life. And I think that one of the basic ones in business is that there are some people who truly are only in the business or whatever they do for themselves. And I tend to think they're in the minority. I think
Mhm.
most people, especially in a firm environment, are working on a team, and they
Mhm.
want to work for themselves, and they want to work for the benefit of the firm. And it doesn't stop at the lawyers. We employ lots of people. At my old firm, we had secretaries, file room people, we had tons of support staff. And these are people that depend on you. They get a salary, and you have to go out there and do your job and do it well so that you could bring in the money to pay for everybody else and to
Yes.
keep them employed. And it's an important responsibility. It's a business.
Ben asked, how much money do I need to start my own law firm doing criminal defense?
I think with criminal defense, you probably don't need very much, because you don't have a lot of overhead in terms of dealing with insurance carriers and things of that nature. So I would think that you could have a small budget to start your own firm. And so much of what you do today is you could even run it out of your home when you start out. The
Mhm.
first couple of weeks, we were actually just running it out of my apartment because our space wasn't ready.
Mhm.
We set up our computers, we used our phone, and it worked. And there are a lot of opportunities to rent small offices. And if you're on your own, you really only have to worry about paying for yourself. It's
Mhm.
once you start adding other people that the overhead increases significantly.
What do you look forward to doing on the weekends?
I guess spending time with my daughter, and I
Uh-huh.
work on the weekends.
Well,
I do. If there's something that I have to do during the week that takes away time from the job I have to complete for my client, then I make sure I have time during the weekend to accomplish it. And it is something I do want to do too.
I can't help thinking how very busy you are, and so I wonder, when you have 30 minutes of free time, what do you do with that?
Well, I'm not a relaxer. I don't know how to relax, and
Mm.
that's probably a shortcoming. And I imagine I'll have to find out what I'll do with 30 free minutes of time once my daughter goes to college. But until then, I just don't know.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We are back. Selwyn Collins. I am Selwyn Collins, and my guest tonight is Rosary Morelli. Rosary, I'm having a wonderful time. And Ash in the chat room said, I am enjoying her appearance. JLC said, she songs like me. Uh, and Tessa asked, if you had to start over, what will you do differently?
I think that as you get older, you do look back on your life and you wonder how you would have changed what you did. I don't think there's any one event you could look back at and say, had I taken that road, it would have made all the difference. I'm not sure what I would have done differently.
Mhm.
I do think that I was fortunate in having the opportunities that I had when I did, and just always trying to make the best of the situation as existed at the time. I mean, I'd like the world to have been different,
Mm.
but as far as what I did, I'm pretty okay with the things that I did with what I was handed.
You are, again, you're a lecturer and you lecture on medical malpractice and so on, but especially women and minority. For young women who are listening to us today, and the minority audience, because we stretch all over, even in Africa, the Caribbean and African, North America. What would you say? What would you say? What advice would you give a young woman today who's, let's say, a double minority, a woman and a minority, in coming into or getting into the legal profession, and for those who are already in the legal profession and feeling that they've been given a raw deal and feeling like they should give up, what advice would you give to them
Well, I think you really have to know yourself. And if you're truly unhappy with the circumstances and what's going on, it may be best to just pull out and try someplace else. Not everybody has the fortitude to keep going and keep fighting, and it varies with each individual. I think that it's always important to try and find someone who you can talk to. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be a mentor. I think that it can help you when you speak to people in like circumstances. I think it's very helpful psychologically to know that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. And joining groups that have, who are women in the law, there are plenty of them, going out and communicating with other women and finding out about their experiences and what they've done and how they've handled it. And it certainly does help to have this support from the people around you. I don't think that anyone goes it alone. I think we're supported by everything, starting with our parents and society, and just the luck of the genes and where you are. I mean, some people are born good looking, some people are born smart. But that's the gift you were given, and then the question is, how are you going to use it, and who's going to help you along the way? To think that you do it alone, you don't. You may grow up in a circumstance where your parents aren't the best,
Right.
but that also forms you, and that also propels you to take a certain route.
You said you hired a young man recently.
Yes.
And you were a little bit surprised by the young female applicants and how risk averse they were.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Your feelings, your personal feelings about women.
Well, it changed a bit about what I thought in terms of thinking that these women were holding themselves back because they were afraid. I know you spoke about fear earlier, and
Right.
I think fear keeps people from doing a great deal that they're capable of doing, but they're just scared. I don't doubt that every applicant that we had, and the 4 that we narrowed it down to, that they were all equally afraid. But the male candidate was the one who was willing to take the risk. He was willing to bet on himself and to bet on us. I was disappointed. No, I have to tell you, I was,
Yeah.
because I had thought these women would jump at the opportunity, especially since they weren't necessarily in the best of circumstances,
Right.
and that to me it was clear they weren't going to advance where they were, but they may have had to, take a little bit less in terms of pay, and they had to think that, well, maybe we're not going to grow and survive, which I don't doubt for a minute, but they seem to be too nervous about it. And that, then you say, is that a quality about women that keeps them from succeeding? If they're not willing to take the risk, then aren't they creating their own problem?
Wow. The women who are listening in tonight might find that a bit controversial, thinking that, well, how can you say women are risk averse? But you're a woman having had this experience recently, and it has definitely sort of formed your opinion or changed your opinion about women and risks.
I think that I think obviously we speak in generalizations. You can't think and function as a human being if you take everything on an individual basis.
Right.
So what I say doesn't apply to everyone.
Right.
What it applies to is the group of people that I had this experience with. Was it a big enough sampling to reach a conclusion from? Well, for me it was. And it was a lesson. It was eye-opening to me. I think everyone is afraid. Everyone. The question is, are you able to push yourself through the fear? I mean, I'm sure you remember when you were younger, there were certain things you're afraid to do, to answer the phone and take a message, or to call and make an appointment, or to call and this is New York City, to call and order in food. But it's something you learn to do. And I find that if you're nice, 99.9% of the time, people will be nice back to you, and it'll help you to get through the fearful situation.
I totally agree. One of the things I work with, coming on this show every week, Some of my friends are surprised that my monologues, I just wing it. I don't have a script. But I do that on purpose because there was an irrational fear there that I would go on and just fumble and don't have something to say. So I dared myself to go on without a script and just speak what comes from my heart. And that's how I was able to kind of like subdue or conquer that fear. So yes, fear is very present. It's present in all of us. But you're right. How do you handle that?
Well, I think that you just have to, as you did, you challenged yourself, and sometimes it's just psychological. If you go through a difficult period of time, all you have to do is pick up the newspaper and look at what crazy things people are doing and say to yourself, well, if the president of the United States can govern the country while he's being, impeached, I think that I could go to court and do a court conference.
I'm going to go into the chat room again. Tessa said, "What would you like your daughter to do law?"
No, but she doesn't want to do it.
She doesn't.
There's no question about it. I just think that it's not appealing to her, and my daughter's more a math science person. So I think that that's the area that she's looking towards.
Wow. And how did your mother? This is Kim. How did your mother react to you becoming an attorney?
Well, I think my mother exists in a different generation, and I'm sure, in many instances she was proud of me, but in some instances it's funny because even though she was at the forefront of being liberated, she was on jury duty years ago, and both my first and second husband were lawyers, but at the time I was married to my first husband. And she was very upset because when the lawyer in this particular case, when my mother was being interviewed as a juror, asked her if there were any lawyers in the family, the only one she mentioned was my husband because she forgot I was a lawyer. I said, okay, but it's, it happens.
Wow.
I think also women don't define themselves as much by their profession. Yes, I'm a lawyer. That's what I do, but it's not who I am. I'm the sum of all of those parts. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a good friend.
Who always shows up to court?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you're multifaceted. You're all these different things. Every time you go to court, every single time, does the lawyer, the lawyer, always show up?
I think that there's a tendency when I do my job to always be in the lawyer mode. But I think the bigger problem is carrying over the lawyer mode to your family life. In general, people do not like to be cross-examined. And there are also times when just encounters on the street. My daughter will say to me, "Mom, you're using the lawyer's voice." So you have to watch yourself because if anything, it's appropriate to act in a way where you do interrogate people and you're tough and do the job. And that forum doesn't exist, for example, when you go to college interviews or,
Ramiro asked, where do you suggest young attorneys look for a mentor and how important is networking?
I think it's important to network for a lot of reasons. I don't think you should network with the idea in mind that you're only looking for business. I think networking gives you the introduction to people who could educate you about the work that you're doing, and you could make an astounding number of friends. And while you can learn a lot from people in the profession, I think once you cement a relationship with someone that involves a deeper connection, it brings more to the table. And I do think mentors are important, but it doesn't have to be someone that you call a mentor. I think that you know when you're turning to a person that you could get good advice from, and it doesn't only have to be one person, because there are lots of ways to do things, and people do them differently. I think it's very important for young people to, at the beginning, seek out the opinions of a number of different people to see which they feel most comfortable with in terms of being true to themselves.
And this is Ben. Was your father supportive of you growing up?
Yes, my father was very supportive. My father was very supportive of me and my brother. And he's deceased now, but I was very grateful for all that he did for us. And it was, as I said, an unusual circumstance at the time. Now, not so much. There are many more house husbands today.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a different circumstance. And my friends always appreciated being with him and remember him fondly.
Mm-hmm. What is your fondest memory of him?
I think just the time he was there after school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was around and he would sit around and joke with my friends and I, and you know, we would just have conversations and enjoy each other's company.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? Well, I'm asking this because I hear so much grumblings about this, that the legal profession is becoming saturated.
Oh, I think it is. I think the profession is changing dramatically and has so since the last big economic downturn. I think law schools now are cutting back on the number of people they accept in classes, and I think far fewer people are applying to law schools because there aren't jobs. And I guess the last economic downturn showed that you could contract and still function without having the same number of lawyers. So unless you really want to be a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't recommend going to law school. It's very expensive, and
Mhm.
you could get into significant debt. So I'm not necessarily sure it's something you should do unless you're sure.
In any of your classes, what's one of the most profound especially when you're dealing with the whole minority issue, women and minority in law, what's the most challenging question someone has asked you, a student?
I think that the hardest thing to do is to explain to people how. I think it's much easier in the work environment to influence younger lawyers because you could show them how. You don't say it in words, you take them to court. You let them read a transcript. It's just different. At a lecture, it's very impersonal, and you're sort of speaking to the crowd in general, just trying to give a list of everything that you should focus on and think about. But it's that one-on-one relationship that's special, and when you can really make a difference in someone's life.
You've been into the courtroom many times,
Yes.
and there, of course, male and female judges.
Yes.
Do you have a preference?
No, it makes no
No,
difference
makes
to me. I just want them to be nice.
Have you? I guess as a non-legal, non-attorney, I'm intrigued. I'm asking this question: have you gone to court, seen a judge, and your heart sank? Like, well, you know, I'm not sure how this judge is going to rule. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's some judges. Everybody has a reputation. Whether it's deserved or not, everybody has a reputation. And if it's somebody I've never been in front of before who tells me, well, they're not going to be in favor of the defendants, you know, I just go in and say, well, I'll do what I have to do. I think one of the lessons I learned, though, is that, and I try to tell young lawyers this, you don't have to be treated unfairly or disrespectfully. If the judge is not treating you appropriately, the recourse that we have as lawyers is to have a record made. I'm like any profession. The majority of the judges are very, very good, but there's always one or two that may not be the best. And usually plaintiffs and defendants all agree on that. And you just have to be tough. You just have to be tough in certain circumstances.
Have you ever had any confrontation with any of them?
Oh, yes. I attract confrontation. But I try to do it with a smile, and I think that carries a great deal. I do. And I think if you're calm and point out that you're not deaf and there's no reason to yell at you, you know, it could help.
Have you ever been found in contempt?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh gosh, that question is just to show that I know just something.
Well, you watch Law and Order.
Yeah, once in a while. Let's take a.
Not you heard me? I said Arrowhead. I love my golden head. Mama, mama. All GT Massive and crew, where are you? Where are you? If you're present, represent. If you're present, represent. Represent. Sing out. From Guyana, mash it up. To Canada, mash it up. From Pittoni, mash it up. To Miami, mash it up. From Buxton, mash it up. To Brixton, mash it up. From Leg One, mash it up. To London, mash it up. Hear them Arrowhead. I love my golden arrowhead. If you feel it in your heart, then you got me doing your part. Arrowhead. I love my golden arrowhead. When I see the flag waving, it's a sight that's so amazing. And I can feel the rhythm blazing. And I can hear the people them saying, Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. Children, Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. When I smell the corn baking, and I can hear the shack shack shaking, cock crow and bird bite baking, road clap and breakfast making. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. If you feel it in your heart, then you guide me through your part. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. When I see the sweat pouring, I can feel my spirit soaring, and I can hear the crowd roaring in a way that God is hearing. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. If you feel it in your heart, then you guide me through your part. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead.
Hey activist, hey activist, holla. Hey activist, hey activist, hey activist, holla. What she holla, what she holla, what she holla for?
Tell me,
What she holla, what she holla, what she holla for?
this is the land that coffee fought for. Martin Carter, another warrior. Some of the pen is mightier than the sword. Check out the power of the still written word. Walk the walk, a man of letter. He came hard, no one did it better. Mental hold that kangaroo. If they can do it, you can do it too. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. GT, are you with me? Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. I got a gold and diamonds powder. Times are hard, we must work hard. Kind is abroad, come back home. Come and see what's really going on. Don't believe all the things they tell you. They gotta lie up them and sell you. Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. If you feel it in your heart, then you guide me through your part. Arrowhead.
And we are back with Rosary Morelli. Rosary, I hope you're doing well.
I am.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll go straight to the chat room. HBK asked, any regrets?
I think life can be filled with regrets if that's how you look back on it.
Uh-huh.
Would I have done things differently in certain particular circumstances? Yes, but you never know how it would have turned out had you taken a different road.
Mm-hmm. And JLC said, sow and reap. I agree. And JLC again said, if your firm were to downsize, what else would you do? I logged on late, so I don't know if this was mentioned before.
Well, what I did do is come from a very large firm environment, and in January started our firm with 2 other partners. So we're pretty much as small as you could get.
do you enjoy that the smallness of the group? I mean, rather than being in a large environment.
Yes, absolutely. What I enjoy about it is that it feels like a little team, you know, and we exchange ideas. We have the opportunity to discuss all that we want to discuss. Maybe sometimes our discussions are too long, but you know, you air what it is that's bothering you. You know, one of the basic rules that we all agreed on was if something is bothering you, you'll speak up about it. I think that one of the bad things about a general business atmosphere is there is a great deal of tendency to backstab, for people to say a great deal about you behind your back, but nobody to speak to you directly about what it is that's bothering them. And I feel that this is a very important quality in building a business together and having a work environment that's pleasant to be in.
If HBK asked, if you weren't a lawyer, what other profession would you have gone into?
Oh, that's a difficult one because I can't imagine being anything else.
Wow.
I mean, I always think to myself, there's certain things I know that I could not do. I could not sculpt the David. I couldn't paint the Sistine Chapel. But short of that, I think I'm confident I could do anything. Certainly I could have done politics. Certainly I could have done business. I couldn't find the cure for AIDS, but I could work in the lab and help.
Yes.
But you have to recognize your limitations.
Would you get into politics?
I thinking about it, I would have as an alternative career. It's not so different from the law because you are involved with dealing with the public, public speaking, you know, persuading people, which is what I do as an attorney who appears in the courtroom. A very few percentage of lawyers actually go to court and are what we call trial attorneys. Most sit in an office and deal with corporations or whatever else they do, but few people actually go to court, and that's what I like.
Oh, you like that? You
Yes.
prefer that?
Yes.
JLC asks, so this is love for the law then. Is there anything else that you have a passion for?
I think just life. I love being with people, and I love to learn. That's why I so enjoy reading, and I enjoy the discussions that accompany walking down the street. I'm very, my daughter and I are very good at noticing everything and discussing it ad nauseum. But that's how you learn, and that's how you enjoy life.
Yes. What are some of the favorite your favorite reading? What type of?
I read everything.
Everything.
I read everything. I do like, I have to say every once in a while I like a good escapist novel where I'll sit there and cry my eyes out.
I like
I
that.
enjoy that, but I certainly enjoy mysteries, but autobiographies and biographies are also fascinating.
Yes.
Those are just incredible.
I am just tempted to ask about this. You have a case, and you know it's going to be challenging. And apart from the case of itself, the opposing side, and you did say early on that you don't pay attention to your adversaries, you focus on the case at hand. But if when you examine the case, yes, you've been an attorney for 30-something years. We examine the case, say, wow, this is going to be a difficult one.
Yes.
Have you ever had a case that you wanted to not take?
There haven't been particular cases that I've not wanted to take, but there's certain types of cases that I think I'd rather not handle. For example, there is a lot that goes on with nursing homes, and at my age, it's not something I'm particularly interested in doing for many reasons. But generally, no. There's always something to be learned from everything. But one thing, when you were asking the question that I was thinking about was, you know, in terms of fear, everybody, as I said before, does experience it. but there's a certain thrill that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yes.
sure that you experience it doing this show.
Oh yeah. Oh, yes.
And it's the same thing with doing trial work,
Yeah.
because you do get in there and you say, oh, this looks like an impossible case, I'll never win. And something always happens, so that you say, wow, I can't believe that there's such an opening for me to pursue it. And it changes. A trial is something that constantly develops and changes. And the only way you know the outcome is to hear what the jury has to say. And I find it amusing that people talk about, well, that was the wrong verdict. And I'm going to say, well, unless you were sitting in that jury box, you don't know if it was the right or wrong verdict, because you didn't hear the evidence, you didn't see how it was presented, you didn't watch all of the witnesses with their body language and read all of the documents, so you can't say. And I think the jury system works well. I think the majority of the time, the people who sit in judgment do the fair and right thing based upon the evidence that they hear in that case.
Tessa asks, have you ever worked in a job that you're embarrassed to admit, like McDonald's?
When I was growing up, I did all kinds of jobs. You wait on tables, you work in a department store, and I had some very boring jobs, but you do what you have to get where you want to go, and you have a certain responsibility to yourself, and then when you have a family, to them, and I always say, if I'll do what I have to do to keep a roof over my head and food on the table.
I like that. You do what it takes. Very good advice. Have you ever had something happen to you that you thought was bad, but it turned out to be amazing?
Yes, because a lot of times things will happen and you say, oh my God, this is the most horrible thing that's ever happened in my life. But give it time and see where it actually ends up. And if you're the type of person that just picks yourself up and goes on, it could end up being the best thing that ever happened to you.
I'm sitting here listening to you or having this conversation with you, and I've come to many conclusions, but one of them about who you are, about you, is that you're easy to speak with. You're a good conversationalist, but more importantly, you find solutions.
Yes.
You find solutions regardless, and that's the sense I get. And I'm sitting here thinking, if I had a case, I would want you to represent me.
Well, thank you.
That's the confidence you've engendered in me.
But I think that's important, don't you? I mean,
yes.
Everything, you come across problems all the time. You say, okay, it's a problem, let's deal with it, let's fix it, move on. What are you going to do?
Yes. What is next for you?
I have no idea. Maybe your job.
My job. You talk about thrill, and just now I was never present to that until you mentioned it just now. It is thrilling at times. You sit in front of someone, you're asking them questions, and you may ask a question and you ask it the wrong way, or it may be ambiguous or so on, and then they say they don't understand. You better be able to think very quickly.
Yeah,
and
I'm
you've
heard some surprising answers
Yes.
that you've not known how to deal with, but that makes it challenging.
It is.
Yeah.
I always find a way. Always find, and I'm persistent too.
Yes.
And so I ask this question, which I ask all my guests: what makes you laugh out loud?
I tend to laugh a lot. In fact, having a teenage daughter, she criticizes me for laughing all the time. But it's just anything, something someone says, something you observe. It could be anything. And your life each day should be filled with a lot of laughter.
Rosary, the show, time is telling me that we've come to a close. And again, what I ask every guest is to close us off with something inspirational. I mean, you've given us many pearls during the show, but some words of advice that we can go away with.
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that we all have something to contribute, and to just use our efforts to do that, even if it's just the smallest things. And to at the end of the day, to say that you made other people smile, and
Yes.
it's not that hard. A simple thank you, holding a door open for someone, and just remembering that we're in a world that has lots of people and we all need each other. So my advice is to not forget that. Don't get so wrapped up in yourself that you only see you and not everyone else, because it's going to rob you of the basic joy of living.
I like that. And Rosary, again, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, you were candid and you were eloquent, and by any evidence of the chat room here tonight, the audience enjoyed you. And I am going to say this: I would love you to come back again sometime.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're now considered a family of CWS, or
Thank
one of
you.
the women of CWS. We have a page dedicated. We have a page on the website is dedicated to women. Yeah, women of CWS. But thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I want to close the show. Oh, somebody asked a question. HBK, or made a statement. HBK said, "Pay it forward." I agree. And so I want to close the show by saying, or echoing what you said about, it is not about you, basically. Get so caught up in yourself. It's about others. Our success is not only for us. It's about the collective. It's about others. So, good night, and thank you for tuning in, everyone. This is Selwyn Collins saying thank you, good night. See you next week, Tuesday.
Who stands up for the children? Who gives the children the choice? Who? Tell me who? Tell me who? A child should be free. Who speaks for the children?